Everybody was wondering when IDW and Paramount announced that they were going to continue their relationship producing TMNT comics under the IDW banner, basically continuing the license. Everybody had kind of hoped they would move it over to Skybound or some type of competitor. That is not to be. We also learned they would be not rebooting, but relaunching TMNT after issue 150, which is the farewell issue of Sophie Campbell, and it cannot come soon enough. And we are all left going, who's going to be the writer? They got to get somebody good. A couple of names that I posited and kind of threw out there is potential bigger names that IDW could possibly afford would be a Ryan Parrott or Kyle Higgins, two well-known writers who have done great work on licensed comic books and do have a good reputation, but are mostly indie guys at this point. But it turns out IDW were big game hunting, and they've gone after someone that's been a pretty big name at Marvel Comics, especially for the last decade or so. Me personally, I have major issues with Jason Aaron as a writer, and I do think he comes to TMNT with a ton of baggage, but I will say this, I'm willing to give this one a chance. There's a couple of things in play when it comes to TMNT and what Jason Aaron is doing at DC Comics that make me much more willing to give Jason Aaron a shot on this one and not assume that it's probably just going to be crap right out of the gate, which I will admit, I'm very skeptical and cynical these days after a lot of the relaunches that we have been getting with major characters. Now let's get into the news that we do have. Jason Aaron is taking over as the writer of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for IDW Publishing. The former Marvel architect and current writer of Batman and Superman will helm the upcoming Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles relaunch, beginning with the 10-page prelude story in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Alpha #1 one-shot on sale in June. IDW's ongoing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series will return with a new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 in July, written by Aaron with creative collaborators to be announced in the coming weeks. The new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series is notably a relaunch and not a reboot, existing in the same universe as IDW's previously established Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic books canon, which can be seen as both a blessing and a curse when it comes to the current IDW canon, because it started out like a house on fire and it has not been good for the last 50 issues or so, in my opinion. But I am intrigued by Jason Aaron on TMNT for a couple of reasons. The stuff he's been doing at DC Comics, and they call him right there a Batman and Superman writer. He's not writing Batman and he's not writing Superman. He's writing a Batman comic book called Offworld, which is kind of Elseworlds. And he's also writing a Bizarro story in Action Comics, which is like the #2 Superman comic book. So he's not like the flagship writer of anything at DC Comics at the moment, but he is working on two of their flagship characters. Really, they're two flagship characters. And Batman Offworld is really damn good. It's a lot of fun. It's got all the things that made Jason Aaron a name to begin with, without all the stuff that he's been doing lately or last 5 or 6 years at Marvel Comics, where he has to go back to the beginning of everything and kind of break the character and then reconstruct them in his own image on what he would like the character to be. He's kind of having fun on Batman Offworld, and I'm having a lot of fun reading that one. The Doug Mahnke art certainly does not hurt. It looks like $1 million. And we did get the first issue of the Superman Superstars Initiative, whatever that thing is. He's doing 3 issues of a Bizarro story in Action Comics. And the first issue was good. It wasn't great. I don't know that they probably should have canceled or stopped Phil Kennedy Johnson's ongoing Action Comics run for it. You know, it was a perfectly fine backup story or miniseries, but it was fun. It was enjoyable. And once again, it had great art from John Timms. So it might be that he was just completely creatively spent at Marvel Comics, and he was continuously going back to the well and doing the same thing over and over. We've got to go to the beginning. We need to go before the beginning and do stuff with these characters. And it feels like at DC Comics, he's kind of getting back to his roots. And if he sticks with that blueprint, I think Jason Aaron on TMNT could be great. He was doing that Conan the Barbarian series from Marvel before they lost the license to Titan Comics, and he was perfectly fine. Actually, it was pretty darn good, I would say, for the first 4 or 5 issues. It kind of peters out. But then by the time he finishes up, you know, the last 3-4 issues were really, really strong again. So he has done license work and it has been good. But the one thing he really has going for him, besides being out of the Marvel family and just continuously doing the same thing over and over again, is he also has Kevin Eastman, who isn't a writer these days, but he is a co-plotter. He's normally credited as a co-plotter of the story. And I don't imagine Kevin Eastman is going to let Jason Aaron go back in time and destroy all the canon that he helped create with Tom Waltz. And I do think having that, you know, regulator, that governor over him to say, hey, yeah, I see what you're doing here, but we're not going to do that because that actually ties directly into something I created, 30 years ago in cooperation with this person, 20 years ago, and it was successful and people like that. We're not going to change that stuff up. I do think it's probably a great idea to have somebody like Kevin Eastman on board, kind of sitting over, or maybe just next to Jason Aaron and kind of guiding his way and telling him, yeah, you actually can't do that, but we can definitely do that because it's good. Now, we do know Kevin Eastman will let you destroy everything like in real time because we saw what Sophie Campbell did with Jenica and all that stuff. But I don't think he would have let Sophie Campbell like go back in time and break the origins of the characters. And I don't see him doing that with Jason Aaron either. According to Screen Rant, Aaron is a major name in comics and has experience with some of the biggest franchises in the medium. His crime series, Scalped, is a fixture of the best comics list, while recent successes include Marvel's 2019 War of the Realms event and Batman Offworld, which is chronicling Batman's canonical first foray into space. Aaron's stories are known for including a healthy dose of violence and a keen interest in legacy, with Aaron having transformed Marvel's Ghost Rider and Avengers lore by revealing iterations of Marvel's most iconic heroes dating back to 1 million BC, given how core these themes are to IDW's TMNT lore, where Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, and Raphael are each the reincarnated sons of the ninja Hamato Yoshi. Aaron is the ideal candidate to carry the series forward. I think Jason Aaron's penchant for going back in time and changing the origin, the motivations, the history of the characters is the biggest red flag about this. That is the baggage that Jason Aaron comes to the job with. What he has done to Punisher recently, going back and establishing that Punisher's wife was about to divorce him, leave with the kids, before they were gunned down, and Punisher went on his mission, that his mission was BS from the very beginning, just because perhaps he didn't like the character personally, or certainly Marvel Comics don't like the character, especially the logo as of late, kind of going back there and destroying legacy of characters. That's kind of what he's known for. 1 billion BC Avengers. The Avengers aren't special. There were always iterations of these characters, 1 million or 2 million years ago, and nothing about them is special. I don't think establishing that as a core tenet of your shared superhero comic universe is a strong idea. In fact, I think it kind of ruins things. And obviously, those aren't the only characters that he's really messed with. He did go back there and try to flesh out Wolverine and kind of created the really limp dick version of Wolverine that we have now, that people want to like, but they don't really buy him nearly as much, directly because of a lot of the damage that Jason Aaron did to the character. And when he gets something that gets him a little publicity, he seems to become obsessed with it. There for a while, he was the guy that created Jane Foster as Thor, which was certainly popular for a time. And, hey, there was a What If comic book that certainly came up with the idea. He expanded upon it. He put it into the canon. And then he would never let it go. It just kept going on forever, even though she had cancer. She was supposedly dying. And people got fed up with it. They wanted to see the real Thor back in the costume. He couldn't give it up. And by the time that he did, he was almost obsessed with getting Jane Foster over as a real hero. And next thing you know, she's the Valkyrie. And that's really what War of the Realms, which he'd been building up to for like 10 years, ends up being all about. No one cared. No one was interested in Jane Foster as Valkyrie. The comic book didn't sell. I think the character might still be Valkyrie, but you never see her anymore. The only person was interested in that idea was Jason Aaron, but he got a lot of headlines for Jane Foster Thor, and he just couldn't let go of it. And I think those are some of the real issues, like the real baggage that he brings to IDW as the guy in charge of TMNT. And we do know the senior editor in charge of licensed comics at IDW is Heather Ontos. Now, I do not imagine she's going to be touching TMNT very much. That is the flagship book that they have, the most important license that they have, and quite frankly, the most important comic book that they will be producing over the next several years now that they've lost Transformers and G.I. Joe and several other high-profile, high-visibility, very important licensed comic books. I imagine it's going to be the Jamie Rich, Mark Doyle show when it comes to TMNT, and they're not going to let someone as flighty and incompetent as Heather Ontos oversee the book, and that's probably a good thing, because I do think that she would give Jason Aaron free reign to do a lot of his really stupid ideas, which is not a good thing because it always ends up blowing up in his face, and he kind of destroys whatever kind of impact or goodwill that he's built up. And he certainly has built up a lot of goodwill with me when it comes to Batman Offworld and this Bizarro story. We'll see if he ruins that by the time Batman Offworld is over. I certainly hope not. For those of you who are not really familiar with the IDW TMNT comic books, IDW Publishing recently announced that it renewed its agreement with Paramount to continue publishing TMNT comics in 2024, TMNT's 40th anniversary. IDW Publishing has published Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics in 2011. Its ongoing TMNT series will wrap up with the oversized Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 150 as the Ninja Turtles' longest-running ongoing series ever. Aaron will take over from Sophie Campbell's 50-issue run on TMNT, which followed Tom Waltz's work on the first 100 issues of the series, all with story input from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles co-creator Kevin Eastman. And that really should be the saving grace for Jason Aaron at IDW in charge of TMNT, is he does have access to Kevin Eastman, who has a very great, outstanding knowledge of TMNT lore and where they borrowed all these ideas from to come up with the IDW lore, because it takes pieces from Mirage Comics, it takes pieces from like the 80s cartoon, it takes pieces from like the Archie TMNT, it takes pieces from all these different legacies and combines them into one perfect tapestry. And hopefully TMNT, starting with issue 1 under Jason Aaron, will be readable again. If you like TMNT, you've never checked out the IDW comic books, I wholeheartedly suggest you do, because it is fantastic. From issue 1 to about issue 90, right before City at War starts. Me personally, I think the last 10 issues, which is City at War, kind of bogs down and does not really deliver. But if you want to go up to issue 100, perfectly fine. You'll probably enjoy that too, especially if you invested so much into getting through the first 90 issues. And there are some micro series, which is their word for mini series, associated with it, like some one shots that flesh out the characters, the lore, and kind of tie a lot of things together. So you'll need to read those as well. But that's just when you stop. At that point, you've lived the IDW TMNT life, and that's like the end of the story. If you continue, you will get to the Sophie Campbell run, which is horrendous and lasted, I don't know, about 45 issues too long. After 5 issues, they should have figured out this is not going to work out and retooled the series and kept it going that way. Unfortunately, they stuck with Sophie Campbell far too long. It just kind of died, and that's one of the reasons that they're rebooting it now with Jason Aaron, which is a much bigger name than IDW typically goes out and gets. Do I think Jason Aaron's going to get a 100-issue run on this like Tom Waltz? Absolutely not. Do I think he's even here for 50 issues like Sophie Campbell? Absolutely not. I think he's a hired gun being brought in by IDW to maybe apologize to the fans a little bit, gain some goodwill, get some sales associated with it, get a nice start going, and then bring somebody else in. But if Jason Aaron can do on TMNT what he's been doing over there on Batman Offworld and Action Comics, and what he was able to do for the most part on Conan the Barbarian, this is going to work out well, and TMNT fans, I think, are going to be very happy, because unlike Sophie Campbell, Jason Aaron is actually a competent comic book writer. In fact, he's better than competent. At his best, he's a really good comic book writer. Unfortunately, at his worst, he's very, very destructive, almost like a Tom King kind of writer, where he has the ability, he's got the talent, it shows through, but then he kind of just kicks you in the balls when he decides to ruin your character, and you feel like you've had the rug pulled out from underneath you. If you are a TMNT fan and you want more of this discussion, I will say this: if you go over to the Patreon, there's no doubt in my mind, Aaron Sparrow and myself will be talking about this in depth, because we are both TMNT heads. We both like the comics, we like the movies, he loves the action figures, and we'll be talking about the legacy of Jason Aaron and what we think he might do on TMNT. If you have not checked out the Patreon, there's a link in the video description, and I think there's going to be a lot of content there you've been looking for.